Thank you. Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, September 28th still, and this is a joint meeting of the Education and Culture Committee and Public Safety Committees. I'm here with my co-chair, Councilmember Katz, and I'm chair of the Education Committee, and we have our committee members and some extras because this is another really important issue. We have one agenda item, an update on in discussion with MCPS and MCPD about school bus stops and traffic safety. Sadly, we have had several incidents recently where students have been injured or died when traveling to or from school. And earlier this week, I led a proclamation with all my colleagues on Walk and Roll to School Day, which will be observed next week, October 4th, 2023. And Walk and Roll to School Day promotes healthy and sustainable transportation habits, along with raising awareness about pedestrian safety and cycling for our children. We also will observe National School Bus Safety Week in October 16th through the 20th, which will continue to raise awareness about the dangers of passing a school bus while it's picking up or dropping off our students. I know all of us, the entire council, was co-sponsored the SAFE Act, which passed and was signed into law. The Safe Streets the Safe Streets to School Act. And we'll continue to work with all of our colleagues on the council and MCPD and MCPS and MCDOT to ensure that children can walk, ride, drive, roll, stroll, and more to and from school safely. So we're looking forward to understanding how we can ensure that this happens, the progress we've made, what we still need to do, and work together to move this forward. I'll turn to my co-chair for any open remarks.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, thank you for all who did the packet, Ms. Frog and Ms. McGuire and Mr. Krupe. And, you know, I think all of us, unfortunately, have witnessed someone that's gone around a school bus. I remember we had a hearing, and I can't remember how many years ago this one was, but the day after, I'm on my way back to the county council for another meeting the next morning, and a young man gets off a bus, and the arms are out, and a car goes right around him, right in front of him, and you couldn't get out of the car fast enough to help the child. Your heart is in your mouth, and it's just a horrible situation. Now, no one got hurt in that instance, but there are way too many instances when that happens. So anything we can do, we should do. And we need to make certain that our school system and our police work together to ensure that our children are safe as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over and invite our central staff, Ms. Farag and Ms. McGuire, in whichever order they have predetermined, to walk us through the packet.
Thank you. And so today we do have participants from both Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery County Police Department.
Yeah, let's invite them up, actually.
Yes,
please. Sorry. And thank you all for being here.
And so certainly this meeting, as you mentioned, was scheduled prior to the council's discussion last week of the pedestrian safety bill that was also adopted. And so certainly those two conversations come together and really, again, reflect the primacy of the concerns around this area for the council. One of the pieces that we'll do today is walk through a little bit of, the MCPS will walk through a little bit of sort of a foundation of some of the transportation operational pieces to try to provide some context and some answers to questions that came up, again, both as a result of incidents, as the chairs referenced, as well as some questions that were raised the other day. We do have a couple of different pieces of information for you in your packet. In addition to the, there's data regarding incidents, there's data regarding the school bus camera program. We also did receive additional information from the police department regarding the crossing guard program and regarding how and at what schools those crossing guards are currently deployed and assigned. Certainly that's been a conversation that the council has had throughout the years in terms of that program and how that resource can best be utilized. We did also receive additional information from MCPS with some more specifics in response to some of the process aspects of how MCPS reviews bus stops, reviews the safety of routes and walk sheds. Unfortunately, that came in a little bit too late for the public posting of the packet, but we will update the packet for the record going forward, but just wanted to highlight that that information has been distributed to council members, but again, was not available online, but it will be following this meeting. So with that, I think we could begin with the presentation from MCPS, if you're ready for that, please.
That'd be great. And to my colleagues, the system is working, so you can put yourself in the queue the normal way, and I can see it. And we'll let the presentations. Does MCPD have a presentation as well? No. Okay. So you're here for so we'll do MCPS, and then if you have any comments, we'll allow you to comment, and then we'll go to questions. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Jawando, Chairman Katz, council members. My name is Brian Hull. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Montgomery County Public Schools. I appreciate the invitation to be here today to discuss this very important topic of public safety, school buses, and walking. In addition to being joined by our MCPD partners, I've asked our partners from MCDOT to join us as well, because there's a lot of collaboration that happens there as well, and so they're in the audience today with us. So before I turn it over to my colleagues to start the presentation, I just wanted to provide a few kind of high-level updates of where we are with our transportation department. As you all know, this is a very large operation that we run. I am happy to report that we started off this school year fully staffed with our bus drivers, which is a very different place than we were in last year. We do continue to see a lot of attrition through that, and so recruitment efforts continue, training efforts continue to make sure that we maintain our operational efficiencies there. We transport over 100,000 students to and from school every single day, touching approximately 13,000 bus stops across the county, and our buses combined travel over 100,000 miles every day. So for some context, that's equivalent to going around the Earth at the equator 4 times each day. And so in an operation that large that touches that many people, that many buses, 1,200 buses in the morning, 1,200 in the afternoon, not everything is always going to go perfectly, but we are in the mindset of continuous improvement and making sure that we are continuing to evaluate the measures, the training that we have in place, always looking for opportunities for improvement. And so over the past year, or last school year, I should say, we were able to consolidate over 24 routes, or actually it's 42 routes, which means 42 fewer buses on the roads in the morning, 42 fewer buses on the roads in the afternoon, which is obviously a good thing as far as pollution, traffic, congestion, and all of that goes. And we continue to look for efficiencies there. We also review our bus stops for safety. I know that there's a lot of concern about bus stops, specifically bus stops on main thoroughfares where cars often go above the speed limit. And so we continue along with our partners in MCPD and MCDOT to evaluate those stops, and we have moved over 24 stops off of main thoroughfares in recent years wherever possible. Some places, obviously, logistically, it's more challenging than others. We also have hired a consultant who is working with us currently to review our routes, review everything through a safety lens, and then we'll make some recommendations again on how we can continue to improve our efficiencies and our safety within our Department of Transportation to make sure that we're providing the best service to the students and the residents of Montgomery County. So I'm going to stop there, and I will turn it over to Ms. Edwards to start the presentation.
Good afternoon, Council. I appreciate the opportunity to join you this afternoon. My name is Michael Lewis, and I'm the proud Acting Director of our Department of Transportation for Montgomery County Public Schools. I want to first give a quick shout out to all of the wonderful employees that work for us in our Department of Transportation: bus attendants, bus operators, fleet maintenance folks, our safety trainers, on up to supervisors. They're up in the morning before most people are, and they are putting, our students on buses and dropping them off in the afternoons when other people are already home. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to those amazing employees. So first and foremost, I want to state that our mission in Montgomery County Public Schools DOT is to maintain a safe fleet of school buses and to ensure that over 2,000 bus attendants and bus operators are safe, compliant, and supporting the rides for our students as an extension of the classroom. Our administrative and supervisory staff prioritize our mission of safety in their work and supervision every day. And as Mr. Hall already noted, we run a tremendous operation that's unparalleled in the state of Maryland 7 days a week. I want to highlight that school bus transportation as an industry is one of the most highly regulated modes of ground transportation in the United States, and the purpose of that is twofold: to keep both our students and other motorists on the road safe. One of our focus areas today is to share how bus routes and bus stops are reviewed, but I first wanted to start with identifying and sharing the 3 levels of service that MCPS provides to our eligible students. And if I'm talking fast, I apologize. This is my first time in front of the committee and the council. So first, the level. Great. Thank you. So the first level of service is our neighborhood and rural bus stops. These bus stops are provided to students who live outside of the board-established walk shed or walk area, and for high school students that would be 2 miles, middle school students 1.5 miles, and 1 mile for elementary age students. Neighborhood bus stops are traditionally located at corners within communities or developments, or they could be at condominium or apartment buildings and complexes. Students residing in the rural parts of our county may receive bus service in front of their residence, as there may not be a passable or appropriate location for them other than their own driveway. This mostly occurs in our western and northern parts of Montgomery County, and of course neighborhood and rural bus stops are for our eligible students who are attending schools in their regular attendance area. Next, we have our central bus stops. These are defined as central locations such as schools, and we transport students to program sites for specific programs outside of their regular attendance area. Some of the examples would be our magnet and choice programs that we offer throughout the district. And lastly, we have our special education bus stops. Students in special education programs may receive curb or door-to-door service if their individualized education plan or IEP requires transportation as a related service. So the levels of service for each school are factored into the placement and the use of bus stops for specific grades and, of course, the age appropriateness of students. We conduct annual route reviews, and the purpose of these route reviews are to assess safety concerns, identify route efficiencies based on student ridership, and then to make changes to existing routes and bus stops when we are alerted of road work, construction, or impediments to student safety that may require a temporary or a permanent relocation of bus stops or the altering of a specific route. In addition to these route reviews, which are conducted annually, it is important to note that the wonderful staff in our department make changes and conduct reviews on an ongoing basis when concerns are elevated or shared, or requests for a new bus stop or the relocation of a bus stop is initiated. For example, as Mr. Hall mentioned previously, during route reviews conducted in the 2019-2020 school year, our staff was able to relocate about 24 bus stops off of major roadways, busier thoroughfares, into communities and into neighborhoods, making them a lot safer. Additionally, staff this past spring, under the leadership team, went through one of the most thorough and in-depth route reviews we've had in order to consolidate and identify additional efficiencies to open up this school year. So we strive to strike a balance, a very delicate balance between efficiency and convenience for the eligible students and families. However, sometimes we are limited in entering certain areas or travel specifically on certain roads due to the size, the height, and the weight of our vehicles. These limitations are factored into our routing and obviously then the placement of our bus stops. However, safety is at the forefront of all of our decision making when routing and scheduling our buses. When bus stops are established, we recognize that there are inherent dangers whenever young pedestrians are approaching a large motor vehicle, and in this case, a school bus. These dangers may arise from the sight lines around the bus stop, the volume and speed of the other vehicular traffic nearby, and the direction to and from which the students are leaving or coming to the bus stop. A crucial factor for us is the degree to which the bus operator can see the pedestrians, both students and parents waiting at a bus stop as the bus approaches, the loading, unloading, and then leaving the bus stop. The degree to which a stop location either promotes or impedes safe pedestrian flow to and from the stop is always considered. And essentially the combination, nature, and magnitude of those factors create a very complex set of unique or relative risks associated with each of these bus stops. So there's no singular approach for us in evaluating the safety of bus stops generally. We take each bus stop on an individual basis in order to conduct our reviews. We then lean on several of our experts, many sitting here at the table or behind me, in the engineering of the roadways themselves, the infrastructure for pedestrian access, and those kinds of considerations. So really quick, some of the least desirable bus stop configurations that we try to avoid would be if students are approaching the bus from multiple directions, right? We prefer that our students are waiting at the bus stop before the bus arrives rather than having students flock from a multitude of directions. We try to avoid placing our bus stops in cul-de-sacs, courts, or dead-end locations because then our buses would have to turn around or back up, which creates another level of safety risk for our students at the bus stops. Those configurations greatly increase the likelihood of students being hurt potentially at those locations. So again, every effort is made to avoid placing our routes and our buses in those kinds of positions. Again, we consider all of those during our route reviews. So when and if changes are determined and implemented, we always base it under the premise of we either want safety neutral or a safety enhancement. We never want to detract from the safety of the motorists on the road, but also, of course, our students who are waiting for the bus or when they disembark. So that's that slide. Do I say next slide? Okay, thank you very much. And so, as many of us know, and as I mentioned previously, the walk sheds are outlined in our Board of Education policy. Appropriate walking routes are established through a variety of analysis that we use. The first is we survey using aerial maps, our GIS data, to see and establish what those safe walking routes may be for, again, age appropriateness for our students. We then combine that with a boots on the ground approach where we're conducting visits on site, and many of our staff actually walk these routes for our students. There's nothing like a good reconnoiter of the area for yourself. Next, we compare walking routes to other neighborhoods within the district for the age appropriateness of the students. We also consider, obviously, existing safety features and if there are impediments to safety as students are walking to and from school. And then we also observe the vehicular and pedestrian use of the walking area, particularly during the times that the students would be walking. So obviously morning and afternoon, and then an appropriate recommended walking route within those distances defined by the board may not always follow the shortest or most direct route, but we often work with our community members to help them identify paths or other walkways that may be better avenues for them to utilize to get to and from school. We do, of course, provide transportation for distances less than what's articulated and governed by our board policies. We review these bus stops in the walk shed and then make recommendations to relocate or remove them as necessary. We are in tune with many of our colleagues at MCDOT if there are upgrades to roadway infrastructure and pedestrian safety enhancements. A great example of that would be in the Boyds-Clarksburg area with our work along the 355 Frederick Road corridor, and we've been in touch with our colleagues so that our students attending Clarksburg High School and Rocky Hill Middle School get to enjoy some of the work that we're doing with our partners there for not just sustainability, but actually encouraging people to get outside, ride their bikes, and walk. We also collaborate internally with our MCPS Office of Facilities and coordinate our efforts with our police department when we assess walking routes and the design and construction of new and renovated schools. So an example right now, we have a partnership when we relocate Woodland Elementary School to their home site. We're working with our partners to establish those safe walking routes now that the school will be reconstructed there. So I'm happy to report that part of our efforts in working with council has made us very interested and energized to solidify a more consistent relationship with our partners so that there will be meetings regularly to assess and review bus stops as well as all of the safe routes to school. Our aim is obviously to be incredibly responsive and bring a multifaceted approach of experts in the room so that we can do what is best for our families and our students in Montgomery County. Next slide, please. And so now that I've gone over at a very high level the establishment and the review of our bus stops, bus routes, and our walking routes, I felt that it was very important for us to highlight the processes for us to review our bus operations and the bus operator training and qualifications. As I stated before, school bus operations is one of the most heavily regulated forms of ground transportation in the United States. We are regulated by the Code of Federal Regulations, the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the Maryland Department of Transportation Motor Vehicle Administration, the Maryland State Department of Education Office of Pupil Transportation, annotated Code of Maryland regulations, and of course our board and county policies, guidelines, and laws. Our bus operator trainees are required to complete a minimum of 9 hours of behind the wheel training and 8 hours of classroom instruction. MCPS goes above and beyond with candidates completing an average of 12 to 15 hours of behind the wheel and at least 25 hours of classroom instruction. Moreover, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration requires that all candidates entering commercial driving participate in what is termed the entry-level driver training curriculum, which brings uniformity and consistency to all commercial driving schools within the United States and Canada. Once a candidate obtains their commercial driver's license or their CDL, there are very specific requirements that must be met annually in order for the bus operator to remain certified to operate a school bus. First, our bus operators are subject to annual medical examinations that are performed by a physician listed on a national registry of medical examiners. Second, our bus operators are entered into a pool for random drug and alcohol testing. Regulations state that at least 50% of our eligible drivers have to be randomly selected and tested for drugs, and at least 10% undergo alcohol breathalyzer testing. Additionally, our bus operators are subject to both pre-employment and post-accident drug and alcohol testing if certain conditions are met, and they're required to complete at least 6 hours of in-service training annually. MCPS actually requires double, so our employees receive 12 hours of in-service training, which goes above and beyond the minimum. We also evaluate our drivers on a behind-the-wheel evaluation that's performed by a supervisor or a member of our safety team, and that's conducted every other year. Buses travel more than 100,000 miles a day, as Mr. Hall stated before, so we understand that sometimes accidents happen, but there is a very robust process and standard operating procedure that we follow within MCPS whenever our buses are involved in an accident. We qualify an accident internally as anything that the bus touches. It could be a bush, it could be a trash can. We count that as an accident because we hold our drivers accountable as professionals on the road. Our standard operating procedure for every accident includes calling the police to respond to the scene. We leave it up to the responding officer to decide what the next course of actions are, and we defer to them for their leadership and judgment, but that's our first step, is 911 is called to the scene of every accident involving a school bus. We then retrieve video footage for each of our accidents and taking photographs of the scene and anything else that may be pertinent to the investigation are captured, and we collect statements from our bus operator or anyone else who may be at the location. Our police partners help facilitate the exchange of information if other parties are involved, and we again follow any directives that the police give. We treat every accident incredibly seriously, again, because we hold our drivers to such a high standard, not just from the federal and state levels, but as MCPS. Our safety and training unit conducts our internal investigation and then determines the preventability of our accidents under the auspices of a bus accident review board. The Bus Accident Review Board is charged with reviewing each case, and we apply National Safety Council standards as well as MSDE accident standards to determine the preventability. We do not assess fault by any means, but preventability for us means that there was nothing the driver did. Sorry, so preventability is the driver did. Let me rephrase that. So preventability means that the driver did not do everything possible to prevent the accident, right? And so I would say a good 95% of the time there was something the driver could have done differently. And so again, we hold them to that high standard. So a bus operator with 2 preventable accidents of appreciable damage, which means damage in excess of $3,000 within a 24-month period, may be disqualified from operating a school bus for a period of 5 years. any more than 2 preventable accidents of appreciable damage within the same time frame will require the bus operator to be disqualified from operating a school bus in the state of Maryland for life. So again, we hold our drivers incredibly responsible for all of these accidents. Following the accident, any accident, our operators are required to attend a post-accident training class. What's unique, what I believe is unique to MCPS, is that we use the specific accidents that the drivers had who are attending the class to do a deep dive to provide best practices and to reinforce the defensive and professional driving skills using the actual cases that had just happened for that review. We also have the ability as MCPS DOT to disqualify bus operators for unsatisfactory driver records. So anything that they do in their own personal vehicle, because it's one license, we hold them responsible and accountable for. We are also able to decertify operators for criminal conduct and unsafe actions. So they may not be having accidents in our buses, but speeding, reckless driving, and other things are not acceptable, and we're able, and we do, disqualify and decertify those employees for a period of time. This is part of our continual and ongoing commitment to keeping our students safe, as well as the other motorists everywhere that we drive. We drive in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and elsewhere. So much of our work over the last several years really has been collaborating with the partner agencies sitting here and behind me to help educate our employees and to cross-train our staff to be safer and better defensive drivers on the road. We recently instituted a meet and greet visit, so a police officer comes to our new driver training class each month and actually speaks to our drivers about the importance of vehicle safety and traffic laws. Our desire and need to keep our students safe is often communicated with our attendants and our drivers through our in-service trainings, our monthly newsletters, email blasts, listen and learn sessions where there's access at our depots to senior leadership within transportation, and reminders over the two-way radios by which we communicate through dispatch to connect with our drivers. We have an immense desire to strengthen the relationships that we have with our partner agencies, with our communities, to further enhance and improve our daily operations to make them safer and better. And we recognize that there is a shared accountability and responsibility to meet the needs of our students, but to address the challenges requires a concerted effort of experts, but also a team that's committed to the safe environment for our students. So our bus operators are responsible for exercising good judgment and safe practices during our pickup and drop-off and while they're in transit, while our students and families have to maintain a safe environment with us at our bus stops and to remain vigilant in this shared accountability. So that's our presentation. For my part, I'm going to turn over to, I think, my colleague, Ms. Edwards, for the next piece. Thank you.
Just to close out, and I appreciate Michael sharing just some of the deeper work which was around the conversation that was held last week, just to really kind of get a detailed perspective in the types of bus stops, how they're evaluated, if we have to reevaluate them and discontinue bus stops. One of the questions that came to us was about crossing guards. And so we do have crossing guards throughout the system, and we work very closely with our Montgomery County Police Department, who deploys the crossing guards, looking at where they should be. When requests come in, or if there seems to be a need either from our schools, after the routes are reviewed and we're looking at where students are walking, we do make that request and have that conversation and do the work with Montgomery County Police Department around it. If you remember last year, we worked very closely, as well as this year, because of some of the shortages that were held in the crossing guard department last year, and we did some recruitment and actually sharing with the Montgomery County public school community around that, and we were able to help with that. We do believe it is an important part in terms of how children get to school, and we are committed to continuing our partnership there. And lastly, when I was here last week on the next slide, there was a very emphatic and detailed request that we collaborate across agencies. And so, as I had shared, we have a belief in that collaboration, and I shared that prior to walking out. One of the critical points for us is we don't do the work alone, and we know we have to hold hands and lock arms in order to do that. And so as we have worked since last week with the partners that you see on the screen, our continued commitment is for some of the things that Michael talked about. You'll probably also hear from our partners. You heard it last week. we pick up the phone, we email, we call. And so we're moving into a more formalized approach in order to do that, and really thinking about the frequency of how we meet from a proactive stance. I would say we've all made that commitment to saying, how do we come together on a monthly basis, and then what are the structures and processes that we need to have in place to make sure that we are building this band. We appreciate the council putting the bill forward, but it's a little bit more about the, what we do before we get to the bill and before we get to the point where we actually have an accident. The second component is there was a request to have an MOU between agencies, and we have already drafted something that we are sharing back and forth. Again, it's about the formalization of the work that we do. And so as we have been in partnership throughout the years, as council knows, there have been shifts in terms of our leadership in the administration of DOT. And so as we come to a space where we are in post-COVID transportation, we are looking at the things that are the needs now, we know that we have to have that level of frequency and things together. So thank you for this opportunity again, just to be able to provide some additional details.
Thank you very much. And I just want to appreciate the level of detail and bringing the deputy acting director here. We asked for that when we started our committee sessions, and that has improved. I appreciate that. We got this, kind of late arriving document, so it's really helpful, but it would have been, let's just keep working on the timing with you together to get it in so that everyone can read it before and inform their questions, but very appreciative, and I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to skip the normal order and go to Councilmember Lukey because she has to depart for a very important reason, so we're going to have her go first with questions.
Yes, I apologize. I got to go get my stitches out. So I can't say I'm excited technically, but that I will be tuning in as soon as I get in the car. Yeah, well, no. So just before, since we were talking about the content in the packet, there is a reference where it says FY and uses academic year language. I'm assuming you meant school years, not fiscal year, because it was, 22, 23, et cetera, with respect to the school bus violations.
Most likely. I'm sorry, we do have some data for both, but yes, I see what you're saying, and I apologize for that mistake.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew it was probably school year data. So in the packet, there was information, and you put it in your slides as well, about the distance for walkers, for whether you are or not getting a bus, and based on your school level, et cetera. Does MCPS take into consideration availability of sidewalks in that assessment? Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so if someone lives a mile away from the school, but there's no sidewalks to get to the school, they would receive bus service?
Not necessarily. The sidewalks or lack of sidewalks is just one factor that we would consider in establishing a safe walking route that's age appropriate for students. Okay.
You mentioned that about assessing anything that the bus touches, right, in terms of an accident. But a lot of the time what we're seeing are incidents that are occurring in and around bus stops where it doesn't involve the bus touching something. The children are getting hurt. So the bus accident review board process, does that include those types of incidents, or does it only include those where the bus itself touched something?
That's a great question. The Bus Accident Review Board only assesses the preventability for buses themselves if they're involved in an accident. It does not assess the serious incidents that occur at the bus stops.
This week in my district, there was an accident around a bus stop that seriously injured a high school student. And when that happened, I went and I pulled the bus route for that area for Gaithersburg High School, and then I also looked at the equivalent bus route for the middle school for that same neighborhood. And I noticed that on East Village Avenue on the middle school bus route, it clearly says students do not cross East Village Avenue, but that is not present on the high school route. So could you describe what that means in terms of the bus? Like, do they do a loop in order to get people on both sides of the road for the middle school but not the high school?
That's another great question. Without seeing the routes themselves, I don't want to speculate for those specific schools within the Gaithersburg cluster, but generally speaking, we route our buses as an industry standard for safety so that buses are picking up on the door side so that students do not have to cross the street. Knowing the geography and the roadway infrastructure along East Village Avenue, it is a divided boulevard-style roadway where we would pick up on both sides of East Village Avenue and would not ask students necessarily to cross. So without seeing the routes specifically,
Right.
that's the general practice for us.
But is there a practice that divides whether or not you avoid students crossing the road based on school type? For example, drawing a distinction between middle schools and high schools?
Yes, so the age appropriateness of walking to a bus stop is also, defined as a high school student can walk up to 2 miles to a bus stop, right? Middle school 1.5 miles, and elementary students 1 mile. However, we do consider a variety of factors for consideration in the placement of the bus stop and then at the age appropriateness for the students. Generally speaking, our high school students receive bus service that may be less, I don't want to say specific, but there is a different level of service where we recognize that high school age students can walk a further distance to get a bus. Elementary school students would probably go into some of those communities, again, because of their age.
Okay, but you would still take into consideration the other factors like sidewalk availability and
Absolutely.
whether you know, the types of roads you have to cross, like are you crossing 4 lanes of traffic to get to your bus stop, that kind of thing?
Absolutely, and actually, very specifically, yes, it is in our regulations that we do not route or schedule our buses that's for students to have to cross those types of roadways.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for.
Thank you. No
Yeah,
problem.
good luck.
Good luck. Yeah. Turn to my co-chair, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it's truly amazing when you stop and think about it that you transport 100,000 students a day. I mean, we take that for granted, and we shouldn't. And Mr. Lewis, you said it was your first time. You should be very proud. Your 50th time couldn't be any better, so we thank you. And I also think it should be noted that you had a slide that Montgomery County Police Department and Montgomery County Department of Transportation are here, and they're proving once again they are air partners. And no one, regardless of whether we consider them separate agencies or not, can work by themselves. We all continue to work together. And I also agree that we need to thank the drivers and the attendants and everyone else who's associated with a bus driver. I can tell you that not only driving a bus, I mean, I'm somebody that looks through a drive-through for my own personal car, so I don't have to back it up. I'm somebody that sincerely appreciates how it is to drive a bus, but the fact that they also have to deal with every now and then a student that's not being as behaving as well as they might or should. They have all of these issues and still have to drive that bus. So we thank them. We know it's not an easy job. The resources that you have, and I know that should change over time, but the resources that you have, are they sufficient? I mean, is there something else that we should do that we could be of assistance on? And you don't have to answer that. Maybe I don't want you answering that right at this time. But I think we need to have that continuing conversation that if it's like with the police say, if you see something, say something. Because we're here to try our best. That doesn't mean we have all the money in the world, but we certainly want to try our best. On the packet itself, it talks about the 10 bus stops with the highest violations. Were all of those somebody driving past the bus? What were those violations? I think it's on page 3 or 4 or whatever. We didn't number I think it's 4.
I believe, yes, Mr. Katz, that is the last page of the memo portion of the packet.
Yeah.
Apologize for the lack of page numbers. I believe that data is the highest violations of school bus camera violations, the data that the police shared with us.
Yeah, I think Director Tippery can comment.
Please.
Those are all violations that have occurred at those intersections, yes.
And on that one listing that you had, you talk about, I guess it's the next couple pages down, but it talks about the in-state that have paid and the out-of-state that have. As you're given a certain amount of time, I don't know whether it's 30 days, 60 days, to pay it. Is that including those, or is this actual people that have never paid or won't pay?
It includes those as well, yes. Because there's no transfer between the states.
The reciprocity.
Right. There's no reciprocity between the states, and there's no point value to it. It is a civil violation. So there are individuals that live outside of our reach that do not pay.
But if they live in the state of Maryland, then they would not get their license or their tags, or won't get something, I'm assuming.
Right. We flagged their registration, so they won't be able to re-register their vehicle until they satisfy the citation.
And Councilmember Luke, you already talked about multiple approaches, so I don't need to talk about that one. But do we ever, if you're, I see the 10 bus stops, they're on main thoroughfares, North Frederick Avenue and other places, Piney Branch, which we were there last night. Do we ever put up a fence or something so that in those instances where there is a concern for safety, that the Department of Transportation, the county at their expense, would put a fence up to help keep children safe?
In my experience, no.
Is that something we should consider doing?
So if I could speak to
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, if I could speak to my time was when I was in the 4th District, when Paint Branch High School was still part of the 4th District. Along 29, they did just that after a fatal accident involving one of the students, because the students would come out of the back of the school near the football field and cross over 29 just to get to the shopping center, and they did put a fence at that location. Now, I also caution everybody, when you start talking about fences, the communities often reach out and yell at me or whoever's in charge.
That part's okay, Mark.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Please, Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Michael Paylor, Chief of Traffic Engineering for Montgomery County's DOT. It's good to see all of you. It's good to be at the table with my colleagues and friends. With regard to non-traversable medians, because fences have become the word has become a pariah because of its ethnic and racial component. We do look at providing non-traversable medians at some locations, but as Captain Yamada mentioned, there are some locations where there's a racial component that would preclude us from doing that. And we try to customize it. In Wheaton, for instance, we put a non-traversable median on Georgia Avenue near Reedy, and we had to style it so that it was, compatible with the environment. The effectiveness, in my estimation, has been probably questionable. Because of its design, but we have to be careful about that. But in any event, we do, where we see a safety deficiency, seek to provide that type of equipment.
And I appreciate that, and I know you have to evaluate everything. But what I was actually talking about was at the bus stop itself. If there's elementary school students standing at a busy road, have we ever put fences up there, and should we?
Yeah, we have not. There are some challenges with that. I wish I could remember the location. We had a situation near a firehouse and some retail businesses where high school students were crossing at an intersection, and we were looking at providing a short segment of non-traversable barrier. And we know students tend to be like water, and so no matter, you've got to provide enough length. We call it length of need if you're talking about barrier, but you've got to provide enough length to discourage the behavior. And if you only provide a short segment of that type of equipment, they're certainly going to go around it, and it's not going to be as effective as we desire.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And before we move on, I just wanted to acknowledge Grace Rivera-Oven from the school board, who's here. Thank you. We continued partnership, and we know this is an important issue for you and your colleagues. Council Member Albernas.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a bunch of questions, so I'll ask some now and then get back in the queue so I don't dominate time here. But with our colleagues in law enforcement here at the table, and we obviously all greatly appreciate your partnership and the role that you all play, wanted to give you the opportunity to share at a high level any trends that you're seeing that might be helpful to this conversation. I know, for example, during COVID, there was an increase in incidences of just traffic issues generally because there was less enforcement, and so speeding became an issue. And now that we are, I think, back to normal, traffic flow and patterns, we've all felt it, have increased once again. And so I'd just be curious as to, at a high level, your perspective that might again be helpful in this conversation. And then I have a few specific questions.
Sure, I'll start and then I'll let Captain Jensen. And by the way, Captain Jensen was recently promoted and he has taken over in our traffic operations division in replace of Captain Dillman, now Commander Dillman. But yeah, we constantly look for trends, just as you described within school zones. I'm constantly in conversation with Director Tippery and Warren about speeding violations and the number of violations that we're seeing within school zones that officers are reporting. And we adjust our coverage both with our central team and then communicate that back to the district commanders so that they can also provide additional coverage. But I'll let Warren add in anything if he sees fit.
Warren Jensen, thank you for having me, council members. Thanks, Chief. The Chief pretty much covered it. What we do is very data-based, very statistic-based on how we do our enforcement and our safety efforts and our education efforts. So we do look for trends in everything that we do. And I think Director Tippery can talk a little bit better because he's been educating me on it, so I'm not going to hog the microphone. But some of the trends with the school bus safety issues, which is why we're here today, are the higher numbers at the beginning of the school year, I think, as people acclimate to school buses being back on the road after a break, things like that. I don't want to steal it because he gave me some notes the other day on that, and he did a much better job than I would do. But I appreciate being here.
Great. Thank you. What we have seen is, like the captain referred to, is there is an increase in the beginning of the school year. However, we always are in comparison with the previous school year. So for the first 2 weeks of this school year, we issued actually 162 less violations than last year. And in the second 2 weeks, which just came in yesterday because we run on a 14 days where we have to get the citations out, we're actually 255 less in the last 2 weeks than in the previous year. So although we do see the spike at the beginning of the school year, overall throughout last year and in comparison with this year, numbers have gone down. 1 month we went down about 400 citations. So when we get the violation from bus patrol, we have staff that have to review it and issue the citation in accordance with state law. We only actually issue out between 40 and 60% of what we're sent. And the number one reason why we void these citations is for drivers that are unable to stop within a reasonable amount of time. So when we get a lot of negative feedback from the community, the program actually works. We're only seeing a 7% recidivism rate. Last year, we had an annual bus report which proved that, and this year we'll be doing another annual report. But the program is working, especially when we see the drastic decrease in citations issued. The word's getting out either through education or through receiving a citation.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Now that we're deep into fall and winter, obviously it's getting darker earlier. I'm just curious as to how much is lighting taken into consideration when identifying bus stops. I know it's difficult, but just close to my house, I walk my dog at 6 o'clock in the morning and I see kids standing on a bus stop. Their parents walk them there because it's pitch dark. And so I'm just curious as to how or if lighting factors into selection of bus stops. And then conversely, in requesting additional lighting by bus stops.
In my experience, it has not necessarily been a determining factor, but it is definitely something we can fold into our review processes going forward.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
And
yes,
from a police standpoint, I can tell you that anytime there's an accident in or near, around or near a bus stop or involving students, we do look at things like that, and the investigators, when they're writing their ACRES report, they'll make a note of that. And if there's something that we can share with Mr. Paler and DOT, to whether it's trimming shrubbery or increasing the lighting, we make those recommendations, and they're well received.
Thank you. proactive, just would be helpful too, and maybe even encouraging parents to make recommendations and making it easy for them to make those recommendations preemptively as opposed to after an accident occurs, I think, would be helpful. The other question I had, obviously at any given moment there's construction. The Purple Line project has been immensely disruptive. Waze, Google Maps often take people in different direction when there is construction that happens, which then has a cascading effect on bus stops. Is there any communication? I know this is difficult, but is there any communication or the opportunity to forge a stronger partnership with MDOT, for example, if there is going to be a construction project near a bus stop, to at least inform you all so that the bus driver can be aware in advance and adjust accordingly?
I'm really glad you offered that piece, because our relationship with MCDOT is incredible. When there is construction planned, we are in the know with our facilities team within MCPS, and so we are able to make adjustments. A perfect example of that is on the Piney Branch Road corridor at Carroll Avenue. There's some construction on some of the sidewalks there, so we've had to readjust and relocate temporarily one of our bus stops at all 3 levels of school. And then Sligo Creek Parkway as well. There was something happening there the other day where we had to reroute our buses leaving Tacoma Park schools. And so the MC-DOT relationship is very much there and present. I think there's definitely an opportunity to enhance that with our state partners if there's construction or things that may be a deterrent or create delays for our buses.
That's wonderful.
And Councilmember, you mentioned proactive. One of the things that Wade Holland brought to my attention before is that through his office, Division 0 office, they have printed out 3,000 flyers at the beginning of the school year and have been using them at general events and back to school nights throughout about covering bus safety, pedestrian safety, student safety, things like that. So
I appreciate that. Just 2 final questions, and then I'll yield to colleagues and then get back in the queue because I got a few more after that. One is, there has been a great deal of turnover among bus drivers, obviously, and we've been trying to scrap and put together the team, and so that means we may hire people that go through the training that obviously reach all the reasonable standards, but there's still a lot of transition. Has there been any analysis in the correlation between, say, some of the newer drivers and some of the more experienced drivers, and whether there are routes that can be more complicated than others and maybe adjustments that are made accordingly? Just, is that analysis going on?
So part of the Bus Accident Review Board's charge or mission is to evaluate the operators themselves, and we go through their accident history as well as their disciplinary if they have been cited for reckless driving, speed, etc. And so, yes, the years of driving is a factor in our determination to either suspend that operator and or take other adverse actions such as disqualification or decertification. On top of that, it's paired with the bus refresher class, the accident refresher class that we hold each month. And so the accidents, again, the specific cases of those accidents are brought forward by our safety and training supervisors who conduct that class. So they go in depth with the operators, really diagnosing what happened in the specific operator's accident, so that they can then provide best practices, some tips for being a better, safer, defensive driver for when they hit the road next. And then the other piece of that, too, is we do track, just my office specifically, centrally, the years of driving experience. And right now we're not seeing a specific correlation between newer drivers, but I think that congestion and just traffic in Montgomery County at large is definitely one of the factors that create some of the conditions for our operators to be involved in accidents. And while I was speaking to the preventability of accidents before, I definitely want to highlight too that not every accident is our fault, with our police partners citing other motorists involved too.
Thank you.
I just want to add to what Mr. Lewis just shared, just in terms of our bus drivers, because that was a critical part for us last year, and it was really important as we went through last year to understand their experiences. So we took an opportunity last year to really celebrate those that had not been with us, had only been with us for more than a year. We wanted to know why they stayed, what were things, because when you have fresh eyes, my feeling is you see every piece of lint on the floor. And so they're able to tell us what's most important for them to stay in that position. But then also we really have to think in the Department of Transportation, you can come in at an entry-level position of being a bus attendant and progress all the way up to the director. And Michael has been through many of those different positions. So we wanted to be able to grow the bench. You asked about the difficulty of routes. One thing to know is that we don't necessarily assign routes to our bus drivers. They actually go through a process that we've worked with our association, SEIU Local 500, where they actually bid on those routes and they say what they're interested in driving. And so many people will, if you talk to a bus driver, ask them what school they drive for and how many years they've been driving. Many of them have shared with me they are now picking up grandchildren of people, that were on their bus as children. So they do have a selection and a say in terms of which routes they get. The field trips are a little bit different, but my everyday route in the AM and PM, that's driven by the bus driver. Okay.
Last comment, and then I'll yield. Bus drivers and crossing guards are part of this ecosystem of caring adults that engage with youth. Talk to them, ask them how their day was, and it contributes significantly to health and wellness of our children. And so, and shout out to our crossing guards in particular, who have really, sometimes difficult and challenging jobs, because they got to be out there rain, sleet, or snow, whether it's hot or whether it's freezing cold. It unfortunately took an awful incident at South Lake Elementary School for us to be able to appoint a crossing guard there. And so to the degree to which we can be more proactive in that space as well, to identify crossing guards, and then to my earlier point, really being more intentional about helping our bus drivers be trained in positive youth development and different programmatic options. We've done that. We did that through Excel Beyond the Bell with all of the bus drivers that drove for the extracurricular activities. They loved that training, and it helped them diffuse situations on their bus or identify challenges and then make referrals often to the guidance counselors at the schools that teachers were not aware of. And so there's a lot more to this than just the direct safety that we're talking about right now. That's obviously very important. So thank you all very much. I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
It's a great point. My kids often, we've all had this experience where, they're either looking forward or not looking forward to going to school, based in part because of who's on the bus, with driver and students. So it makes a difference. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Friesen, Council Vice President Friesen. Thank you, Wade Holland, from our Vision Zero coordinator. Thank you for being here as well. Councilman Friesen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Chair. Thanks to each of you for being here. Mr. Lewis, welcome, and thank you for your work and your thoughtfulness today. Very close to my heart, this issue. First, my advocacy career in my life started when I was in 5th grade and I was in a major bus crash on Falls Road as a student at Wayside Elementary School. And in fact, I had tried to advocate to change the bus route, and that fell on deaf ears. Turns out that at 10 years old, I was not seen as qualified to change the bus route. But at the location that many of us were concerned about was where the crash took place. And it should have been changed. And the people who knew that it should have been changed, it didn't take an expert. At 10 years old, I knew it, and my classmates knew it. It took people who actually went on the route and who walked in the spaces and rode in those spaces. And none of our parents made a left turn at the place where our bus made a left turn. And you wouldn't know that unless you had lived in that area for a period of time. So one part of this, I think, in terms of the collaboration, is making sure that we have proactive opportunities for parents and community members to weigh in with real feedback, because those are the folks who actually know where it's safe to walk and where it's not, where it's safe to turn and where it's not, what's the right way and the wrong way. And I will say, I appreciate the MOU that is moving forward. I harped on that quite a bit in our legislative discussion from the other day. I'm glad that those conversations are happening. I hope that it happens soon. But we need to create those opportunities and be transparent about it. Because one of the things that was very concerning, one of the reasons why we couldn't implement specific to bus stop changes is that the Department of Transportation said, we really don't know where the bus stops are and they change and we wouldn't know. And if the Department of Transportation, who you've said you have a great relationship with and where things are really positive, if they don't know, then how does a community member know? How does the Maryland Department of Transportation that you want to work better with know? How do all of us know? I think we need to create a process where that map of bus stops is available on a website, that when changes get made, they get changed and adjusted, and we all know where they are. I mean, I think as a community member, I would like to know that. And frankly, if that means community members changing their route because they don't want to get stopped behind a bus in the morning on their way to work or on their way to drop their kids off somewhere else, that wouldn't be a bad outcome either. So I think it could be in the interest of safety as well. And I've shared with colleagues before, and from a public official standpoint, the worst day of my professional life was Friday morning, where I was on a walk where we were talking about one death on a roadway unrelated to school of Jake Castle, which was after school, and walking with his parents along Old Georgetown Road. It was less than 12 or about 12 hours after Sophia was killed, just literally steps away. You could walk to where she was killed from her bus, where my niece and nephew were in elementary school, and got a text message about another trauma which turned into a near fatal collision on Montrose Road, also in my district. Literally within 24 hours, a death, a near death, and a walk to talk about safety related to another death, all of children. And so, I appreciate the fact that we're having this conversation, all the work that's taking place. And I appreciate that you're just using the terms that are given to you. But I think we should change our terminology as we have on the county side. We don't refer to them as accidents anymore. We refer to them as crashes. An accident presupposes whether something could have been avoided or not. And so I just would suggest that, as we make these culture changes, that we change the terminology that we use. I think it is important. I think it sends a different message to the community about safety. So we just suggest that. But related to what you called the bus accident review board, I would call the bus crash review board personally. Who serves on that?
So the bus accident review board is chaired by our safety and training supervisor. And then we also have a member of our depot managers. One of our 7 depot managers serve on there. We also have a variety of cluster and bus route supervisors who are boots on the ground folks at one of our 7 depots. And then we also have a representative of our SIU Local 500 on there.
Would it make sense, or is it possible, legally or otherwise, to have somebody from the police department, somebody from the Department of Transportation to be part of that board?
So I would say as we move into the space of working together, those are some of the pieces that we do need to talk about as we formalize our relationship. Where are we in space where we have these natural conversations like you're talking about, and where are maybe spaces where we don't have that established? So I'd like to bring that back to that group to be able to meet and discuss, to see how and the most efficient way to make the work more seamless.
Well, I would strongly encourage that, even in a ex officio informal way, if they just attend the meetings and provide input, if they're not formally allowed to be part of it, because through the various levels of regulation, there's a specific type of person that's supposed to be part of that. But I would encourage that. I would also encourage that group or a similar group to be formed that includes police and includes Department of Transportation to look at the incidents that don't involve buses. You mentioned all of the work that goes into your bus drivers, and God bless our bus drivers. We are so lucky to have so many people who are willing to take on these very difficult jobs. It's not easy to deal with that many young people in general. It's even harder to do it while you're trying to operate a large motor vehicle on roadways that can be dangerous and get them to and from where they're going safely. They go through, it sounds like the process for them is even more strict, it seems like, than it is for promotions to some of our most important positions, as we heard earlier today. I am personally less concerned about how we're dealing with bus drivers that get into incidents. We need to continue doing what you're doing, but that is highly specified and regulated, as you noted, and much more concerned about other motorists who interface with our kids who are incredibly vulnerable going to and from school and waiting at bus stops. And, Sophia, as I mentioned, she was hit by a bus. And that was an incident that was looked into, a tragic situation. But Eyal, he was hit by another motorist who left the roadway and hit him, his father, and his toddler sibling. And that had nothing to do with the bus driver. It wouldn't even have gone to this board. It was treated as a separate incident. But if something was less than that, but the next one would have been something like that, it wouldn't. I'm not aware of how that would have been dealt with. Similarly, Muhammad was at a bus stop. He was not hit by a bus driver. He was hit by a Jeep. And so, figuring out how we can take the processes that currently are in place that work, but expand them out to look at not just life-threatening incidents, which I do think we're investigating, but the steps below that would prevent a life-threatening incident. I really think that is the area that I'd like to see explored more. In terms of the appreciable damage that you mentioned, the $3,000 for what I would call a bus crash, how is that determined? Is that $3,000 to the bus? Is that $3,000 to the bus or property that the bus hits?
So the monetary total would be any of the property damage, our own vehicle or another person's vehicle or another person's property. And so all of that is factored in as total damage, and that's how our COMA regulations state we have to assess the preventability. And then the preventability is drilled down by certain thresholds of dollar amounts for damage. So there is a sliding scale of what we would call preventable 1, 3, 5, or 8. And 8 would be the $3,000 or more.
What happens if something, let's say there is an incident where a bus hits somebody but at a relatively low rate of speed and there are no serious injuries? So there would be really no, I wouldn't imagine, if there's no property damage to the bus, there's no medical, serious medical injuries to the person, how would that be investigated, or would it be?
So if that were the case, I would imagine police would be involved, and so we would take the lead. They would take the lead, and we would confer with them once the investigation was concluded. But as I mentioned previously, we can decertify and disqualify a bus operator for unsafe actions. And for me, that would be one of those qualifying events where I would decertify or disqualify someone from driving for a period of time or for life in the state of Maryland if that was the case.
Are parents notified every time the police are notified if there is an incident involving a bus? Is there a letter that goes to parents? Is that an automatic trigger?
When children are on the bus, or I'm just trying, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, if there is an incident involving a bus, are the parents at that school, or even the parents on the bus, related to the bus, are they notified of an incident involving the bus?
We work with our schools. If there is an accident on the way to school or from school, we work with our schools to be able to learn what students need. And we look at not only the social emotional supports, but then we also provide that information back to parents so that some parents will want to take their children to the hospital or to the doctors to be able to be seen, but we do loop that communication back around.
But there's no specific policy of this triggers a notice home?
There's no policy.
Okay, because we've heard some concerns from parents that they learned later there was an incident involving a bus, but they weren't notified, and that raises much deeper concerns from parents. So I would strongly suggest, as you do this work of figuring out how to improve processes, that there be a very specific protocol in place, like you have with how you notify police, to say, when parents are notified, what is the threshold with which that notification goes home, and make it automatic and consistent so that parents don't feel like things are being withheld for them, because obviously if a parent feels like something has been withheld that involves the safety of their child, deep levels of concern and skepticism arise from that, understandably. And so I would just strongly encourage that. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for your work on this. Obviously, these are critical issues, and we have a lot more work to do, and I will certainly be following up on the MOU and following up on some of these other enhancements that I think are necessary. And I'll yield back to you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. And I'm going to just jump in briefly here with a couple questions. I went to my colleagues first because we had various emergencies. I want to pick off on something that Councilman Friesen just asked, the notification system. It was on my list. There is a notification system when a bus is late, right? Different schools will have that. Like I've received it as a parent. And what? Let me ask this: is that school generated or is that coming from transportation, MCPS? Like they'll say the brown bus is 224 is late today. Like I've gotten that before, and then you figure it out. It goes out to everybody.
At this moment, it's generated at the school.
That's what I thought.
We are moving toward a notification system, almost a bus tracking system that you've heard about in other counties. We've just solidified in terms of our contract, in terms of moving forward, and we will be rolling that out toward the end of this year. And we're very excited to be able to do that because, one, students can watch it, as well as families can watch it, and then there's a component at our depots.
Is this the bus tracker system?
Yes.
Okay. Like the app?
The app, yes.
App-based system.
People call it the app, the tracker, where's the bus, all of those components.
And so you'll have that ready to roll out for all routes by the end of this year? Is that what I'm hearing, or is it?
We will roll this out this school year. We were working with the company that we identified to ensure our data sharing agreements were strong. One of the big things that we've heard from our families over the past year is that we have a lot of apps in MCPS. So we wanted to condense it to make sure that what our families have said and what we know to be true is there is an ease to be able to get in and to see the information. And so we will be working in terms of the education people will need to know about it, how to use it, and how to sign up to make it worthwhile.
I appreciate that. The crossing, before I go to that, the MOU draft is in process, and I'm assuming that'll include all partners represented today, MCPS, MCPD, and DOT?
We just started to share language around it in terms of a draft for it, but as shared earlier, yes, the partners that you see that are here, we've had those conversations. We have our commitment to move forward in the collaboration that we need to do.
That's great to hear, and thank you for being so responsive to that in such a quick time. There are 11 vacant crossing guards position. Is that normal? Is that typical? Is it higher or lower? And what are the reasons for that?
11 vacancies. Thank you, Mr. Chair. 11 current vacancies is actually a little better than we were doing last year. I think we were in the low 20s last year. Yeah. We credit that to just our hiring push and, as Ms. Edwards spoke about, our partnership just to kind of push some of those vacancies out in the school space as well. So we really appreciate that.
That's great, yeah. And to the points that were made earlier, those are just such important positions. So,
if I could add,
yes, please.
We run into the same problem that the MCPS faces with bus drivers, with crossing guards. The turnover rate is really high. The last couple of years, Captain Billman and now Captain Jensen and I have worked with our personnel division to try to expedite that hiring process to get people in queue so they can be replaced. But we're always seem to be one step behind or take 2 steps forward and 1 step back when it comes to keeping the number of guards up to where they should be.
Is it the amount of money, or what have we dug into a little exit interview wise about the turnover? Is just people get a better job, or it's because it's part-time, or what all of those?
I would have to ask our personnel division. They would be the ones that do the exit interviews.
Okay.
It's a pretty good deal. Yeah. You get full benefits by working not so many hours and days. So I don't know what the reasons are, but I can certainly ask.
Okay. And same questions for the bus drivers. Have you any information there that you can glean around the turnover, how the high turnover rates?
So we certainly conduct exit interviews for both attendants and operators when they leave, and just anecdotally from our specific staffing manager who supports transportation exclusively, the hours are very challenging just because it's shift work and you're waking up at 4:30, 5 in the morning to be on a bus, and then in the afternoon you're expected to work from 2 to possibly 5 or 6 p.m. So the hours there on a split shift are very challenging.
One of the things we had talked about last year and we had talked about with our SEIU 500 partners was how to offer more ladders into other MCPS jobs. Like, for example, you're a driver, but maybe you're a paraeducator, you're doing something in the school, and we had tried to see if we could strengthen those pathways? Has there been any progress or formal articulation on that?
We did some work last year around it, and we specifically looked at positions during the school day after the bus runs were complete, especially at schools where the bus drivers were actually taking their buses to paraeducator positions, possibly main office positions for them to be able to complete, even cafeteria worker. Mr. Lewis and team did a really good job and put out a survey to the bus drivers to see where there was interest. And so for those that were interested, we kind of built that bridge to have them apply to those positions and to be considered. Because we recognize that sometimes people want to do something else than transportation. It also gives them more hours as well. And so we will be continuing that this year, but we felt it was important to know specifically what they were looking for to navigate them towards applying for those jobs.
Yeah, and keep us posted on that, because even if on the point of hiring, if you could articulate that at the front end, it might be a retention strategy. Last question, then I'll turn to my colleagues. Is there any different training for the electric bus drivers as they come online? You know, obviously I always brag about us. We're the first in the nation and to move to an all-electric fleet. Obviously we're moving to an all-electric fleet. Because of the type of buses that those are, is the training updated? Is that different?
That's a great question. Yes. So as we roll out the electric buses, there is very specific training that we host at the depot level. So for the bus operators that will be assigned or will be using the electric buses, they go through training at the depot level.
And no pay differential, it's same pay and all.
Same pay.
Okay. All right. I have others, but I'll come back later. Councilmember Stewart.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me today, and thank you for being here and providing this information. I want to go deeper on a couple of things that my colleagues have raised. When you talk about earlier, Mr. Lewis, the route reviews, is there any sort of like just basic checklist that you have to go through? I know you said that you individually review each route. But is there, and because the reason I ask this is, I think for members of the public, particularly parents, having just some basic foundation, somewhat of what you provided here for us today, would be helpful for them to know what you're looking at. And I didn't know if that is something you have, but I think in terms of just communication to parents and others, it would be helpful. So, there.
Noted. Thank you.
Okay. But the other thing is, I think Councilmember Albernaz brought this up about the bus stops itself, and we talked about that. What is the review process now for a bus stop? Like the physical stop, not the traffic along it, but like where the students are standing and gathering.
So first and foremost, it would be the sight lines, as I mentioned previously. So we want the stop to be visible, to be seen, right? Not just for the driver of our bus approaching and then leaving the area, but for others, right? We don't want a bus stop that's on a blind curve. We don't want a bus stop that, you know, is blocked by foliage or trees. And so the sight lines are first and foremost. And then, of course, the entry and then exit path of our school bus. While we understand that when a bus stops, we're trying and supporting a safe location with the red lights being activated and the stop arms coming out, we don't want students to have to come from a variety of areas. So again, the door side pickup is something that we strive for so that students do not have to cross the street if they don't have to.
Great. And maybe as you all are beginning this collaboration, I think as Councilmember Albernaz talked about, you know, considering lighting, also just considering the space in which we are asking young people to gather, particularly large groups of high school students in the morning, and it's dark. You know, the area I represent and live, there are a number of spots where you have a lot of young people going to high school in the morning, and they're trying to stand on not a very wide sidewalk. And so adding that, I think, is important, also considering where we put our bus stops. The walk sheds, you know, I think you talked about not necessarily the shortest, but most, and not necessarily the most direct. And I very much appreciate the memo kind of laying out the 5 areas. I think here is when you think about the walking routes. And I think channeling Council Vice President Friedson, who said this before, I think if we could add more community engagement there, because I can't remember where did Michael's here. Taylor talked about people are like water, and they're going, if they're in a rush and they're dropping their kids off, or their young people going to school in groups, they're going to find a path. And we may put on a map, this is the path we want you to walk on, and we can give out maps at the beginning of the school year, but their behavior is likely going to shift to what is either the easiest, where they're picking up friends, to continue walking to school, particularly in our areas where we have large multifamily buildings, and you have, like we have walking groups, and where families are picking up other families, and taking that in consideration. So if there is something we need to change to fix the built environment, because that's the way people are going to go, I think is going to be really important. And thank you, Ms. Edwards, for being here last week. I did find out that map I was talking about, it was actually a Safe Routes to School map that had X'd out the way to East Silver Spring Elementary School. So I appreciate you being here again today. The last thing, and this was brought up as well, but I wanted to dig in deeper on Purple Line construction, particularly, and I thought you put it so nicely that we could enhance our work with our state partners. I might put it a little differently, but I appreciate how you stated that. But I guess one of the things I like to know, in particular, how are we addressing the issues with our bus routes, where our bus stops are, particularly with the Purple Line construction, because we're going to be living with that for a while.
So when we learn information or have updates or receive new information from our partners, we then relay it to both our school-based staff to help us corral the information and share that with our families if we're going to do anything transportation related to change it. And so we have specific cluster supervisors assigned to each of our high school clusters, then obviously all of the feeder schools that go into it. And so the Blair cluster supervisor and the West Farm Lower Depot manager are very attuned to the changes and the nuances that are going on. Both are veteran MCPS employees and incredibly familiar with that particular region of the county, which is why they're in those jobs there. But when we learn information and then we make recommendations for changes, we do cue in other partners here in the room, as well as, again, our school-based folks, so that we're making informed decisions based on the information at hand.
Great. And if I could take a moment and we can follow up on this, but I was out recently doing a walk around with members of the community and Purple Line folks, and we realized that the light at Arliss and Piney Branch, you have to wait 5 minutes before that light changes, and it is only 30 seconds to cross Piney Branch. And there is a bus stop there on, I believe, Piney Branch, because it had to move from Arliss. And we've been asking State Highway to check into that, but since you're here today, if you also could just alert, because I'm not sure people realize how long that light actually is and the short amount of time people do have to cross. And I know that is a bus stop that got moved because of the construction, and so if we could get your attention on that. And then finally, I'll say on Woodland Elementary School, there are a lot of parents who want to talk about that. So I'm happy if you want to connect with my office to also have those communications, because people are waiting for the school to open, and they are anxious about how students will be safely getting there. So.
I love when our stars align, so I'm happy to take you up on that.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just jump in? For the timing of the light, not the light itself, but the timing of the light, doesn't that come under county control? I see some head shaking behind.
Are you asking if you?
Yes. So did you all make a note of that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilmember Balcom, then Councilmember Mink.
Okay, thank you. Just as we have MCPS, police, and DOT here, we also have education, public safety and T&E covered here. And so, and we've been talking about pedestrian safety for quite some time as a full council. And so it's really deep in our brains right now. So I just want to piggyback first on what Councilmember Stewart said, as well as Friedson, in terms of the walk route that MCPS designates isn't necessarily the route that the kids take. We have a very dangerous situation in Clarksburg, where the Clarksburg High School, there is a walk route that goes through a neighborhood which has sidewalks, relatively safe, but that's not the route they take. They walk down Old Baltimore Road, especially in the morning before it's really light out, and there are no sidewalks. And the point that I want to make, first off, that's a lighting issue, and it's just also the issue that I know that parents have communicated their concern about this many times, and so I think that's the issue where Councilmember Friedson said it very well. It's the parents and the students who actually walk to school or walk to the bus stop or have to stand at the bus stop that really do have the most expert knowledge about whether it's safe or not. So I think that I would just ask that the feedback loop of what the parents' reality is taken into consideration. And I know that you get a lot of information from parents, as do all of us. I'm sure that every person up here has at least one or two school bus issues in their constituent hopper right now. So I think that's important. And then also, you mentioned that the bus review committee, the bus crash review committee, looks at collisions where the bus is involved, but not where with non-bus collisions. And I think that is so important to make sure that when we're looking at the safety of school bus, the safety of where the bus stop is, that's just as important. Of course, you want to make sure that the bus driver and the bus, if a bus is involved, that you evaluate that. But if a student is hit at a bus stop, regardless of what vehicle was involved in the crash, I think it's just incumbent on the school system to look at that. It's one of the issues that we talked about in the Safe Streets Act. We will be requiring that you look at that. So it would be great proactively if you could include any crash at a bus stop for MCPS to look at. And then also, what happens when there are collisions involving students or faculty, for that matter, anyone, on school property that's not a bus? So, the parking lot of the school coming and going. What happens if there's a crash in a parking lot of a school? How do you resolve that?
So, in my experience in MCPS DOT, that's not something that we handle. Our purview is school buses.
That would be a police response.
So who calls the police? Because the police, I guess the school, does the MCPS do anything about that?
If it's on school property, we contact police to make them aware of what occurred. Mm-hmm. They come to property, assess the situation, similar to what we talked about if we have a bus accident on the street. Mm-hmm. And based on that, we'll determine the next steps, if there's additional resources, emergency services that are needed. But because it occurs on our property, we make the call, the emergency call to police.
Okay, and when we were, thank you, and when we were, had lengthy discussions about the Safe Streets Act and the jurisdiction about, to refresh everyone's memory from last week, If there is a collision in the walk shed or in a school zone, then the DOT will look at infrastructure to see if infrastructure was part of that collision. There was a great debate about whether the bill had jurisdiction over MCPS property. And it was determined that it wasn't. It was just the county streets. So in discussing the MOU, I would ask that part of the review of a collision that occurs on school property, that you look at the infrastructure to see if infrastructure was part of that process, and if any changes need to be made to anything on school property to avoid a collision.
Thank you for that. And so when it is on our property with our facilities office, we do take that into account as we talk about bus lanes, parent drop-off. Mr. Lewis talked about Woodland as one of those examples, even thinking about Cabin Branch in terms of just the layout and the streets, and we do take all of those pieces into account.
Mm-hmm.
It does not prevent us from discussing it with our partners, but because it's on our property, those are things in terms of responsibility. So we can have a fresh set of eyes, but in terms of what occurs on our property, in terms of the debrief with that, working with our police partners and our internal facilities department.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm glad to hear that, you know, when you're looking at a situation, that there's a feedback loop with DOT in terms of lighting or infrastructure. I know that's we're formalizing that with the bill that we just passed. So I appreciate that. Yes.
And just to follow up with your parking lot scenario, we would definitely respond, but it would be predicated upon us being notified. So if there was two vehicles, one of the drivers would have to call us,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody from the school would have to call us, or if it was a pedestrian involved, they would have to call. Somebody would have to call us.
Sure.
Not every accident would require us to write a report. Okay, so you could look at a computer and say, yes, we responded, but there might not be a documentation of the incident that occurred. If it was two cars, fender bender, no injury, we wouldn't write a report.
Okay. If a person was involved, would there be a report?
Generally speaking, yes, but again, if there's no injury, it would just be a property damage collision, and we would not have to write a report.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So in that situation, I think that it would still be important for MCPS to review the collision to make sure that, and part of what we looked at when we looked at Safe Streets is that a collision, this particular collision may not result in injury, but if there's something, if the infrastructure, if the parking lot, if the crosswalks, contributed to that collision, the next collision might not be minor. So appreciate that. And then for the process of reviewing collisions at bus stops, we had one just 2 days ago. Councilmember Lutke referred to it in Montgomery Village. So could you just kind of briefly walk us through how you're looking at that collision, and what are the steps that are happening to see if that bus stop needs to change?
So, being new to this setting, what I did was I reached out to our colleagues at Vision Zero and asked them if we could convene, some sort of dialogue or discussion around it. I've not yet been briefed on all the details, but that's what I did to initiate some conversation about a review. And I think that was in the spirit of our work to get an MOU established just for these types of things.
And so what things would you personally be looking at to determine whether the bus stop should move, considering that I think this is the second collision that occurred at this bus stop?
So again, first and foremost, the sight lines, is it visible? Is it marked just, as a corner? Where are we on a particular roadway? What are the vehicular, speeds? What are the patterns of traffic during the, prescribed time for the bus stop at every level of school? What were the weather conditions specifically? at the time of this particular case. So those would be some of the factors that come into play, but also how many students are utilizing the bus stop. Is it the same? Is it different? Are there variables there? Are their parents waiting at the bus stop with them? Are their parents waiting for them in cars? Are students waiting or at the bus stop standing outside, or are they waiting in vehicles? All those kinds of things are things that I would look at.
And will you get input from the parents when you look at when you're assessing, investigating a collision? Do you hear from the students or the parents?
So as of now, it's not built into any of our processes, but I am a firm believer in extending every opportunity for collaboration, which would obviously include our families and our students.
Mm-hmm. Would you be talking with the parents of the child who was involved in the collision?
If that was something that was appropriate and they would like to, then absolutely I would welcome that.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Balcombe, I appreciate you asking those questions. I think you are specifically speaking to some of the things as we talk about formalizing our processes. Because even though Michael was able to very quickly share about 20 different questions and things in his head, there are also other pieces to take into account. So I think as we formalize those processes, the other part that I'm hearing as an undercurrent as well is how do we make it visible? And how how do we let people know, and then how do we engage with folks along the way?
Yes, and I think Councilmember Stewart brought that up with her remarks. I think that parents want to know how are these decisions made, and particularly when they disagree with the decision. We have one right now in the Quince Orchard. A bus stop was changed, and parents aren't happy with it, and they want to know why. So I think that anytime you can be very clear with parents as to how these decisions are made, I think it's best for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you all for being here today and for your partnership on all this work, and to my colleagues for the great questions. Following up on the state engagement piece, everybody's favorite topic, as Councilmember Stewart noted, we heard you, Ms. Edwards, very diplomatically note the need for some better communication from Shaw about, sidewalk and other road maintenance issues. And I also noticed that all of the top 10 violation locations are at state roads. So it would be great, next time we have this conversation, I would suggest it'd be great if we can try and get Shaw here. But could you talk a little bit about what the lines of communication are now in regards to these issues, if any? What has that looked like?
Which issues? Because we've talked about a lot here, so I just want to be clear.
Well, so I guess school and pedestrian safety issues in general. Where are they? Where have they been more or less responsive? When we look at the top 10 violation locations on these roads, and if as those concerns are how has your experience been in interfacing with them or in asking for heads up about maintenance issues?
Councilmember Ming Kai, and thank you for indulging the musical chairs. So specific to the 10 bus stops with the highest locations of the highest violations, I think there's a little context that probably should be introduced here. Right. And the reasoning behind the targeting of these 10 locations was that there was seemingly an inordinate number of citations that were issued for vehicles passing school buses, and they are typically on roadways that are undivided roadways, which means they don't have a median section. I think there's one on there that does have a median, and there was a lot of discussion between our agency and the state delegate that was looking to advance a particular bill to address these on how to make them safer And of course, the safety had to do with vehicles passing school buses. And so when we evaluated these locations, and we're doing that in concert with the school bus monitoring and stop safety review bill and that effort, when we looked at these locations, our obligation as the DOT was to determine whether or not there were safety issues or safety deficiencies that needed to be addressed, even though they were predominantly located on MDOT/SHA roadways. And in all frankness, when we looked at these 10, only 1 out of the 10 arose to drive a request for consideration of a treatment, and that treatment was the potential installation of a pedestrian hybrid beacon. And even that treatment, or the introduction of that treatment, was predicated on the thought that a student may cross that roadway. So if a student isn't crossing, this was at, I'm sorry, to be clear, this was at the 8800 Colesville Road location. If students aren't crossing the location to access the school bus, then the sum total of our evaluation was that there were no safety deficiencies or safety issues that needed to be addressed at any of these 10 locations.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. On the other hand, great to hear about the strong partnership with MCDOT and the abundant communication there. One of the issues that's come up a lot with our constituent services is the need to improve outreach to communities about things like sidewalks and potential sidewalks. So I'm wondering, does or could MCPS act as an outreach partner for DOT as well? For example, sending home flyers with students when a new safe routes to school sidewalk is anticipated, so more families could have a heads up to participate in public hearings and things like that. Is that something that MCPS already does or would be happy to do? DOT, is that something that seems useful? Just an idea.
I think as we, again, build out our partnership, it creates that opportunity to share information. It was mentioned earlier some of the work that Wade and Dewan have been doing in terms of giving information out about driver safety and things that drivers can do to actually be mindful of our children on the road. And we did work last year around the walking school bus, the Walk Wednesdays. Those are all components that we can share. I think we just need to make sure that it's matched and it's proactive. I do see great opportunity for us to be able to do that. But again, we're moving into space to really be able to formalize a relationship. I think today is a definite visual to show that we have already started the conversation. I heard Swiss cheese again today, last week. Yeah, it'll be a new thing now, Swiss cheese, but really thinking about, where there are gaps, where it makes sense, and the proactiveness. So
Great. Can I see Mr. Paler with your finger on the button?
Councilmember Jawando, that Swiss cheese analogy that's the analogy of the year. I'm going to just go ahead and make a motion to have that considered as the analogy of the year for 2023. Councilmember Mink, MCDOT is in the process of navigating the 200-some county schools and developing a walkshed report for all of them. I believe we have somewhere on the order of about 130 or 140 left, and certainly can swing my eyes back to Councilmember Jawando and thank you for the work, the encouragement, and the funding to help us start accelerating the completion of some of these reports so that we can actually get sidewalks on Montgomery County roadways. But the sidewalk matter is a complex one, and so when we had worked together, I guess it's now 2 years ago, to get some additional funding to get more sidewalks on the roadway, we did find out that in these walk sheds and for safe walk to school principles and practices, that many of the residents are simply not interested in having sidewalks in their neighborhood, and it's difficult for us to, especially since we live in a democratic republic, it's difficult for us to say we're going to build sidewalks and you must have them. We're in the process now of arguing a matter for Joanne Lellick elementary school on Stateside Drive, where we're in,
Oh, I know.
Yes, in the middle of this. So and so I guess I'll back up and say, when we do our walkshed analysis, that walkshed analysis involves a very detailed, intricate connection with the local schools. And so we are talking with the school officials and asking them about walking practices of their students, walking routes, what they observe, good things and bad things, and we encapsulate that information in our walkshed analysis to drive safety improvements that are not limited to sidewalks, but other traffic control devices. So that partnership is already in full swing and full play, and we do it on a school by school basis when we're looking at the introduction of sidewalks for our Safe Routes to School program.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, and the the partnership and the engagement that you all are doing, and I really want to commend the progress that's been made just in the short time since we had the last conversation around this. All positive things, and I would just note that this might be one additional piece to consider, especially with the safe routes to school, because as we spend money to build out those safe routes to school, we want more students to be transitioning to become walkers, to be using those sidewalks, coming from further away. There are folks whose families, their doors might not be getting knocked under current procedures, but if they get that notice in their backpack, then they might be somebody who could show up to share their perspective at a hearing. Last question. What do we do about car lines at schools during drop-off and pickup? It's like an unanswerable question, I know, but I gotta ask it. Yeah, I know, sorry. Say the best for last. And, I'm specifically interested in ones that cause safety issues, obviously. They're annoying for everybody for a lot of reasons, and they're not ideal and all of those things, but where we really see safety concerns, like what are the potential solutions there, just even logistically, what's possible. I'll give you one example. Briggs Cheney Road in front of Cloverly Elementary School, you probably saw this coming. It's a 2-lane road with heavy traffic, open section roadway. You have cars that are stopping to line up to pull into the pickup drop-off area, and then you have other cars and buses going into the other lane to get around them. And again, this is, it's a relatively heavy traffic area. It really feels like a disaster waiting to happen. But what's possible? And I'll note that I know there's signs. There's no stopping signs that got put up, so I know that there's eyes on it. But the signs are not. They're not really changing the behavior.
So we're both fighting to turn our microphones on over here to answer this question. On our end, and we talked a little bit about just the parking lots for schools and kind of where folks are dropped off. We do have staff that will go out and kind of really look at what's going on. We did that, I think it was the first day or really the first week at Cabin Branch. We wanted to see how buses were coming in, how many kids were on buses, where there might be some backlog or congestion in terms of drop-off. We also take into account first week of school, mostly people drop their kids off or they're walking them to school, and then we start to see an increased ridership on our bus. And so as we're looking at what's going on, we are providing some recommendations to the principals. Sometimes we see families want to stop way before the place in which they're supposed to stop to drop off, and that creates a backlog on the street, and that's just as much as shifting up and telling them, putting it in a newsletter, waving them up. I'm famous for being at a school and saying, come on up, you got to drop off over here, and then walking the students in. We also look at possibility of how our buses are coming into the schools and possibly even where they're parking when they're in the bus lot. So we're looking for those levels of efficiencies and to do that work with the school team. We also work with our police partners in some of our schools if they need enhanced traffic support, whether it is either for an event or in the mornings. We have some places in the mornings and afternoons. We do reach out to be able to have someone to be able to support, because that is not work our security assistants should be doing. So we do recognize that. So we kind of do a little bit of collaboration on that end, and then this is the tag team of where you come in.
Thank you so much, Dana. So, of course, the DOT would have significant interest generated when the traffic does spill back onto the county facility and potentially create a safety matter. And we've seen that in a couple of different school scenarios, Contour Drive, Briggs Cheney, as you mentioned, Councilmember Mink. And what we seek to do is meet with the local school officials and even, I cannot remember the school, but even the Director of Transportation at that time, to talk about how the traffic flow patterns might be able to be changed on site. And so we've met on several occasions and actually napkin sketched some potential improvements that could take place on MCPS grounds to facilitate better traffic, on-premise traffic storage so that it doesn't spill back out onto the roadway. Briggs Cheney is an interesting one because of the Cloverly Local Park, which is adjacent to it, and that wonderfully nice big parking area that sits right next to the school. And so when we met at that location a couple of months ago, we suggested that coordination be entered into with parks to see if they were okay with having parents park in that area and then walk their kids down the hill in steps or whatever, so that the parents didn't have to wait to store in the drop-off lane and then pour out onto Briggs Cheney, but they'd have some kind of off-premise parking location. And so I don't know what happened with that, but I'll jump back to the signing issue. And so we talked with law enforcement, we talked with MCPD, and they asked us to install signs to help facilitate the issuance of citations and this hard encouragement to parents not to stop there. And so that wasn't really the solution. It was to enable law enforcement to more effectively and with a good conscience do their job. And so again, that matter, we believe, at least in the instance that you brought up for Cloverly, we think could be rectified by utilizing that lower level parking area for vehicle storage. So.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful, and appreciate you all. Again, the partnership there is great, and yeah, we'll be happy to follow up about how we can help facilitate that transition or encourage it or whatever. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Alvarez.
Thanks. I'll be quick. I know we've been at this for a long time, but this has been very, very productive. I really appreciate everybody. So one thing that frustrates all of us is the length of time sometimes it takes for speed cameras to be added or a left turn signal. Projects that have even, no pun intended, been green lighted at the state level, but take a long time, to enact. And this is more of a state issue, and I'm glad to hear there's a positive relationship with the state. But and this drives our delegation crazy because they hear from constituents all the time. I'll give you a couple of examples. In the Great Seneca area around Seneca Valley High School, there have been some recommendations made, but that have not yet been acted. And then in my neighborhood in Kensington, it took almost 2 years to get the left turn signal on Connecticut Avenue. And there is a cross there between Saul Road, where Silver Creek Middle School is. That intersection is very dangerous. But the good news is the left turn signal has gone in, but it took forever. And so I wonder if, as in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation, and T&E gets updates often on various issues, that we figure out a better mechanism to send joint letters between the school system, DOT, law enforcement, the county, and our delegation, or even consider legislation that would speed up some of these projects, particularly in school zones. Acknowledging that may not be the perfect solution, but just to really highlight and underscore the importance of this. So it's just an idea, but one that I think that we should pursue. And then somebody said something that triggered something in terms of partnerships, but there's a sign at Beers Mill Baptist Church asking motorists to slow down for children that they did on their own because there's a school bus stop right by that church. They took it upon themselves to be good neighbors. And so I wonder if we can do more to encourage those partnerships, whether it's potentially taking advantage of a church parking lot that's not utilized and could serve as a more effective place for parents to wait, rather than and minimize some of the traffic at schools, or even thinking outside the box and creatively. We have these programs where we sponsor highways and volunteers come in and do cleanup projects in those areas. Well, what if we sponsored bus stops and had partnerships in place with the immediate community so everybody can help cut down the shrubs on their own and minimize some of the staff personnel that it takes, which I know is difficult to be able to, dispatch to projects like that. I think everybody wants to help, and we just have to make it easier for them to do so. So those are just some thoughts that I had as you all were speaking, and I don't know if anybody has any comments on any of those, but I will yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Good observations. This is a really helpful session. I appreciate all of our partners. I just want to emphasize you didn't get a lot of airtime today to the MCPD because the program is working. People are slowing down, behaviors changing. We've talked about this last year, so I just want to thank you and see if there's anything you want to say. But I am continue to be pleased with the automated enforcement. I know that people don't like them, but it's working, and that's why it's working, because people don't like them. And so, but anyway.
No, we always appreciate the opportunity to be here. I will say that Mr. Katz pointed out that he was proud of Michael and the way he presented the first time. I've spoken a number of times before them, and I have never received that same accolades. But
you know what? I don't even want to start. I'm not.
Well, thank you all, and thank you to staff. This is something we'll keep checking in on. I do think one of the things I want to underscore is the need for increased processes and protocols around these issues that are raised, right? We don't want to come back and just say, oh, we'll look into the individual issue, but you have a Department of Transportation. It was raised by other colleagues. I don't share this view, but that maybe you all shouldn't be MCPS in the business of transportation. I think you clearly demonstrated why you are, but that being said, you need to fully embrace the role. And so whether it's a school bus or something that happens, this partnership is an example of that. How quickly you move towards the MOU and had those conversations with partners, I think, is an example of that. And because we need to ensure the safety, and it's a huge priority for this council. You see, you almost had a full council here just even at this session today. So really appreciate the work, and we'll keep tabs on this, and thank you to staff. So
thank you. We look forward to following up as well.
With that, we are adjourned.
PDD